Welcome to Red River Session, Sukrita. Such a pleasure to have you.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So right off the bat, I want to start with your book, which you did with Yasmin Ladha, Country Drive. Now, in the introduction, you've written, you might like to know how Country Drive began. We are both very good at getting lost on highways. And then you say, we followed an unseen trail, creating without obligation. Now that's as intriguing a premise than any for a book to germinate and flower. So I can sense a backstory. So do spill out the details.
Yeah, I think you could be very good at CBI or, one of those detectives who can, kind of take on, because some things happen very spontaneously when we are even writing, right? But yeah, in terms of the first statement, that we are both very good at getting lost on highways, I think that both Yasmin and Yasmin has been a very dear friend for a very long time. And we have similar backgrounds because we both have Kenya is in the background, right? So Kenya, she was also born and brought up in Tanzania, and so was I. So as a result of that, we are both very, there's a concept of going for a drive, which in India is not there. There's always a destination.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
We always think of a destination. But if you go for a drive, I remember, by the way, the first fight that I had with my husband, who's totally Indian, the first fight I had was, I said, let's go for a drive. And he said, where? And I got upset. He said, left or right? On the way, he would say, should I turn left or should I go right? And I would get so angry because there idea of abandon, right?
Absolutely.
You let go on the road.
Yeah.
And the idea of getting lost, and I think first of all, going for a drive without knowing where one is going, and then just enjoying it by the flow, the spontaneity of it.
Yeah.
So that was one. And so getting lost is also romanticizing the idea of abandon in a way.
True.
Romanticizing the getting lost. And you'll be surprised that, getting lost with me is much more than with Yasmin. And I would, forte in driving has been to get lost, right?
Okay.
In the sense that, and I would not, for a long time, I was not using GPS. I was not, and I think there was somewhere a deliberateness about it, just to be on the road without any end in mind. And as a result, I would get into problems also, obviously. And what happened twice is, and that's actually writing a poem.
Yeah.
When you're writing a poem, you're on the road and you don't want to, know the end till the end happens, right?
Very true.
And the end just happens like a surprise. And I love driving. So, in fact, Gulzar Sahab, who also translated my poetry, and at the same time, who also, when he would come to Delhi, sometimes at some destinations would be like, okay, so-and-so's house for dinner or something.
Right.
And I would be driving. I would take him. And then I would get lost, not knowing which side to go, and then not finding the place. And then he wrote a poem on that. As to, I don't have it right now, otherwise I would have, read that out.
Oh,
he wrote
lovely.
a poem on, subconsciously, I want to get lost, therefore I get lost,
Can you believe it?
And he would always say, no, but I need to, maybe take Uber or something else, maybe take another taxi, because you are going to get lost anyway, even if you have the address.
Oh, I love this.
That one, the desire to get lost is what I'm talking about, which has a sense of abandon about it and all that. And also the idea of a highway, right? The idea of the mainstream, to not be on the mainstream, right? So So that also is something. I mean, I'm looking at it also like a metaphor right now.
Right,
You know,
right.
to get lost on a highway. And then,
Hmm.
as far as the second part is concerned, I think it's linked very deeply with what I have said already, which
Hmm.
is, followed an unseen trail,
Hmm.
and creating without obligation of having to arrive at a point,
Right,
right?
right,
There is
right.
no obligation.
Hmm.
So it's that kind of thing with which the book also started off. It
Hmm.
triggered with that.
Hmm.
We didn't know what we were going to do. I was a little skeptical initially. How can two people do a book together, that of
Hmm.
poetry, right?
Hmm.
And then we decided that no, let's start and see how it goes and where it goes. And does it go anywhere at all, right?
Sure, sure,
So it
sure.
was with that spirit that we did. One of the things, if you've seen the book Country Drive,
Hmm.
you will know as we were doing it, we also decided that we will have talking points there. After every section, we will have, I will have a poem, she will have a poem, and then we will have a talking point, and then we will also maybe have some illustrative kind of a sketch
Right.
or something there.
Which is
So
so
it just,
interesting.
yes, and it evolved like that. I just feel that, in poetry there are endless possibilities
Hmm.
of not just playing with words. In a poetry book, it's not just playing with words, or in the writing of a poem itself. Obviously, we also know how placing of the words in a particular way can also, create another kind of a visual impact.
Right.
And many people do that. But that is use of space. How do you
Hmm.
use
Hmm.
space? Do you use page to write
True,
poetry or what?
true.
But in terms of, what you can do you want visuals in it? Do you want in the book, now in this case, there was another voice. Now, what happened in this case was in Country Drive, that my poems in this book are different from my poems in other books.
Hmm.
Anybody can notice that, a
Hmm.
researcher
Hmm.
would be able to make that out.
Hmm.
Because when I write a poem for this book, it would be with Yasmin in mind,
Right, right,
right?
right.
So, and,
Absolutely.
and the poem would get triggered off by maybe some line in her poem,
Hmm.
or in some discussion, something may have evolved, and something she may have said, or the same would be true of my words to her
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
my poems to her. So, these poems have a different kind. Yasmin has a verve about her,
Hmm.
it's like, and my poetry got that touch here,
Hmm.
which is
Hmm.
not there in my other poems,
Hmm. Hmm.
not
Hmm.
poem. So this was a very interesting self-discovery, how
Right.
there can be a dialogue between two poet friends, through poetry, writing of poetry.
Yeah, there's a
So
energy
that much.
flow which happens. I think that is something which is very, very tangible. And in fact, some of the poems address each other with name. And I saw Yasmin saying Sukrita in the middle somewhere,
Yes,
as if she's talking to you or reacting to something which you've stated in
yes.
your poem. So it's very charming.
True,
And the
true,
great part
true.
about the book is just the way you stated, it's got a certain trajectory which is going somewhere, but you also see it going here, then it's going there. It deals with certain aspects in the beginning, then it goes somewhere else. It's almost as if you're on a road and you are encountering new experiences and new thoughts are coming in, and you are addressing those and moving on with it. It's a marvelous and a very unique kind of a journey which it kind of takes you on.
Yeah, yeah. And that's why we called it Country Drive, you know.
Yes, yes, yes,
Country, it's not
yes.
a city drive, like, it's not
Yeah,
that. It's like we're
yeah.
going out of the city, and there is a meandering and then coming back to, there is a coming back also that
Correct,
happens.
correct, correct.
And that, if you notice in the, sections that we have here, the
Hmm.
titles were given later. It's not as
Ah,
if we had it in mind and then we wrote a
okay.
poem each of that. No. But
Interesting.
two happened, and then we would think, what is the common title that we could give?
Got it, got it. But do you discover as you go along when you write a book of this kind that there are certain concerns and certain themes which are in any case dear to you, or haunt you, which do come out when you put down words onto paper? Does it happen?
Yeah, of course, because there is a kind of a subconscious, isn't it? There is a subconscious that works there.
Mm,
And you, much that you might try, that it should not,
mm,
that you have to remain on the track, as it
mm,
were,
mm.
even if you try that, the subconscious takes over.
True.
And it might take you and try to bring out something which your conscious self may be resisting, but it happens because a poem has to have an autonomy of being.
Very
It
true.
has to have its
Very
own
true.
autonomy.
Very true.
And I love that idea because, you remember that I used to, as a child, an adolescent child, I used to play penchant. What was it called? And, the spirit would come to the finger.
Planchet. Yes, of course. Right.
Planchet.
Planchet. Planchet.
I remember
Yes.
that.
Yes. Yes.
You can't help it. The finger is moving,
Yeah.
and your pen is moving, or your keys, you're typing, and you just can't help it. It just takes its own trajectory, wherever it might take you. It might take you into it might take you into a forest. It might take you into the jungle of thoughts which you are not able to unknot. They are not, and you don't know what to do with it. And that gets exposed because it's like an X-ray of the mind, as it were. So that's the beauty of writing poetry, because you also discover some things about yourself in the writing of it.
Yes. The charm and mystery of writing poetry, because you don't know how it'll end. That's the whole thing. And that's where you discover yourself. Very well said.
And you also have an element of surprise at the end.
Yeah.
I mean, as a poet, you're a little surprised. But did I want to say this? Consciously you ask yourself, have you let out something to the world which should be actually in your diary?
Yeah.
No.
And that's what makes the poem more powerful, probably, because
It does.
Yeah, if it shocks you, it's going to really make a difference out there.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's as if you can't, I'm not discounting craft. I'm not. But I'm saying at the first go, it has to be that. And then you might want to work at it. Sure. Sometimes the craft is so internalized that it comes ready-made, But many times, not like that. There would be a rawness about the, experience, idea, whatever. And then you start working on the words, and then you become a wordsmith.
Correct.
And you work on it.
Yeah. Tell me, you have dual geographies in your blood. I mean, there's Kenya and there's India. So how does each of these places impinge on your consciousness?
They're there all the time. And I, in fact, for a long time in my life, when I had little children and so on, Kenya had been suppressed deeper into my self. There was a kind of a drowning of that identity, as it were. But in the last 10 years, I find that that is surfacing more and more. Myself in Kenya, right?
Okay.
So it's not as if I want to relive that childhood, but there is a greater consciousness of that reality, which is, as you rightly say, flowing in my blood, right?
Right.
And in my case, what was significant is that my mother was also born in Kenya.
Okay.
And so she was born and brought up in Kenya, not my father. My father was from Sialkot, right? So my mother's, whatever, in everyday practical life, when you're brought up as a child, in any case, as a child, I was in Kenya till I was 14, right? So after that, and that's all the formative years that I spent out there.
Right.
And after that, when we come here to India, my mother is as ignorant about the vegetables here, the kind of fruit here, right? Because till recently, we had never had I don't even know how to say this word. Parmal? Is it Parmal? Yeah,
Parwal.
Parmal. Parval.
Parwal.
So,
Parwal.
uh, so, my maid brought that. And I said, what is this vegetable? So she said, don't you know what this is? This is supposed to be very special. But we never used to put it there. So,
Right.
everyday life also, you find that because of my mother also not having lived in India, there are many things I missed out about India. So
Right.
Kenya continued to be with me because of my mother. That was one reason. And there are
Right.
many, many other things that, Kenya brought with itself.
Right. Right. Right.
Yes, the two geographies in terms of sheer geography and climate.
Right.
Because Kenya, Nairobi was just 2 degrees below the equator,
Right.
and it was at the altitude of 6,000 feet.
Mm.
So you had the climate was so wonderful.
Right.
It was moderate. It was no severity of any kind, heat or cold. So I carried that geography with me, and I could not tolerate, even now, I cannot tolerate extremes very easily. Right?
Yeah. How things get into your blood, I mean, and they stay with you.
Yes.
But, taking off from what you said, then what is your notion of home? I mean, how does a sense of belonging get created, particularly when home is also a shiftable concept? I mean, your son shifts to USA and suddenly that also takes on the name of another home,
Yeah.
So
But
yeah.
yeah. Sunil, in my case, I have had a quarrel with my father, an ongoing quarrel about the idea of how he denied denied home to our childhood. How? Because all the time, the 14 years of my life that I was here, the refrain was, when we go back home. Because to him, home was not Kenya.
Yes, it was India.
It was in Israel. Yeah.
Yes.
But we were born there. We, the children, were born there.
Yeah.
So we always felt, my God, but when we came to India, it didn't feel like home at all.
Yeah.
It was so different, right? So we were neither at home here nor at home there, because always the idea was we have to go back home.
Correct.
So to me, therefore, my concern with home, my whole idea of home, it's like having an imaginary homeland all the time.
Right.
And therefore, I think I'm a poet because of that.
Wow.
Because I'm homing in words. I'm creating, I'm weaving a home. And I worked for 3 years with homeless people as a young lecturer. I worked with homeless people and realized that we identified with each other. I was as homeless as they were. Now, of course, it sounds like a matter of luxury, because I had bricks and mortar around me as, walls of a home, while they didn't have a home. But in the state was that of homelessness. And so I have been on the lookout for a home forever. And now probably finding comfort in the idea of locating my home in a painting, in my words. I'm constructing it all the time, probably.
This is so interesting, because it also means that every time you're trying to get to some form of roots which you're searching for, and that's what the quest is whenever you're writing. So so how much of your being a writer emanates from this restlessness? Is that something which you feel keeps addressing the words which you put on paper?
I think it does, because it got compounded with the fact that my father was a refugee from partition, right?
Really?
So, because he was a refugee, he came from Sialkot to this side of the country, I mean, the border. And when he comes this side, he's not at home here. And when he goes to Kenya, and he got married at that very time, and when he goes to Kenya, that was a condition, by the way, that he would marry this girl only if he agrees to go to Kenya, right?
Okay.
So she got married to my mother and went to Kenya. And he was in any case homeless, and he was a refugee in Ambala. So he's been a refugee all his life, because when he went to Kenya, he felt more in exile there, right?
Because it was a strange land.
It was a strange land. And so that homelessness that's my legacy, right?
Right.
And he was a refugee always, and he was a writer, and he was writing stories of partition. His well-known novel, Sleepwalkers, is, all about, the same idea of partition and having to cross the borders and so on, and carrying the home in the head. You carry your home, like, you have a London in America, right?
Okay.
You have a London in, it's like having Lucknow in Karachi.
Okay. Okay.
And that is novel.
Yeah.
Poirot, Sleepwalkers, where he's talking about how Lucknow was carried in the mind by people and reconstructed there. So there is an Aminabad there.
Wow. Wow.
So he was engaging with these thoughts, and these were the emotions that he was dealing with all the time. So obviously he didn't have to talk about it, and yet he was transmitting it all the time.
Right.
It was a very powerful presence in the house, right? So I think my legacy is also that of homelessness. And I was the one who was working on American literature and, English literature and so on. And I had to say goodbye to all of that at some point. And even in my research, I did a book on partition, partition narratives. I started working on Indian literature in search of my identity.
Wow.
And I abandoned all my PhD, etc., etc. So whether it's my poetry or my research areas, obviously everything got defined accordingly.
Right.
According to my restlessness is what you're saying. So I was addressing my restlessness. I was addressing my lack of identity, consciousness about who I am, what I am. So obviously all this angst of a particular kind will creep into my poetry, right? Some way or the other. I have little snippets which came out of my experience with the homeless people, for instance. Several pages, little snippets,
right?
Like little poems. Yeah.
Right.
Similarly, lots of other things that happen, which I'm asking myself very basic questions like, who am I? Where am I going? What am I all about? Kind of, which I cannot take for granted. But some people who are born and brought up with the security of a city of their own, a country of their own, and all of that, they take all that for granted.
Right. We don't always.
Existential angst of a particular kind. That I think the complexity of that, as a person who is also a kind of literary critic, if I were to dissect myself and analyze myself, this is what I understand, that.
Before we leave Kenya, just one question. I'm curious. Your father was a writer. Obviously, he dealt with words, and he, of course, had this huge experience, the stories which he had to tell. So, when in your childhood, did he encourage you to write? Or is it something which came to you because you saw him writing and do it so powerfully? How did your childhood evolve into you becoming a writer?
Yeah, see, obviously it does make a difference that he was a writer, and my mother was also in the, trade of writing and reading and teaching and
of course,
so on.
yes.
So there was always a library in the house of literature. All of us doing literature. But I would not say that I became what I did only because of that, primarily
Mm,
because you're also as a child reacting to it. On the
mm,
one hand, you conform, but on the other hand, you're also rebellious.
mm,
So I think my father never said right. He never said that to me. But yes, he would definitely, both my mother and my father would, they were very keen that we have Indian languages, that as children, we should learn Hindi, Urdu, Punjabi. So they deliberately spoke to us in Punjabi. And
okay.
yeah, and my mother would teach me Hindi because there was no Hindi in schools. And my father would also be very keen that we should pick up Urdu. And so I remember Shama Aslam, a very
Mm,
beautiful lady, was even good, very, very good looking. Actually, we called her, eventually, all of us called her Baji. And I
mm.
used to be dropped there to her house to learn Urdu. So all those efforts were
Wow.
being made.
Okay.
But and also, magazines were being brought from India, were being sent for, like Bal Bharti, Parag, Chanda Mama,
Right, right,
you
right.
know.
I
So
remember
that
those.
you would, see, yeah. So I think, yes, there was that atmosphere created of words and languages,
Mm.
and roots on the, because after all, language also gives you roots,
True,
doesn't it?
true, true, true.
And so my first poem was in Hindi, by the way.
Okay, that's
And
interesting.
yeah, and never again, but that particular poem got published in Parag, you know,
Oh,
strengthened. But why poetry? Why not a narrative? Why not a short story? That's where my rebellion was. My little rebellion was, I will not write a short story.
ah,
I will not write fiction. So I started doing poetry. And maybe that was a reaction to my father doing fiction.
okay, okay.
Yeah.
So do you remember the very first poem you either read or memorized, something which stayed with you,
I was
something which
No,
kind
I
of
was
went into your being?
small. No, I was too small. Are you talking about my own poem?
Yeah,
No,
no, I
the
mean, I'm
one.
talking about a
No,
poem which you remember, something which affected you and said, "Ki, wow, this is the power
I
of
think,
poetry."
yeah, I think that I began to feel only when I was maybe 15 plus, the
Okay.
poems that I read.
Uh-huh.
And I think one poet that I was bowled over by her was
Mhm.
Sylvia Plath.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay.
So Sylvia Plath, my God, I was trying to lap her up, read left, right, and center, beneath the words, above the words. And in fact, even now, I still have this book lying with me on my table,
Oh,
which
look at
is
that.
Ariel, yeah, poems
Right,
by Sylvia Plath.
right,
And I
right.
always dip into it. And, words like, for instance, I can, even as a teacher, I've been quoting this in the class.
Uh-huh.
Like Lady Lazarus, I don't know if you
Uh-huh.
know this poem. I
Uh-huh.
just happened to open that. And maybe because I always open this, so it opened at that particular point. And in between, I mean, of course, she starts like that. I've done it again. 1 year in every 10, I manage it. And then she goes on, a sort of walking miracle. My skin bright as a Nazi lampshade, my right foot a paperweight, my face a featureless, fine Jew linen. Peel off the napkin, oh my enemy, do I terrify. And then she goes on, it's a long poem.
Wow.
But the lines that hit me very effectively are, dying is an art like everything else.
Wow.
I do it exceptionally well.
My
I
God.
do it so it feels like hell. I do it so it feels real. I guess you could say I have a call.
My God.
It's so hard
What do
to,
you say to
know.
that? Oh my God. Oh my
Exactly. It's
God.
so intense. And so Sylvia Plath had a tremendous impact.
Hmm.
And I also read her little piece, which was autobiographical. I won't say it is fiction, it is autobiography of a kind, The Bell Jar.
Yes, of
And
course.
what she's saying in this dying is an art and I do it exceptionally well, you know. Actually, she demonstrates that in action. And she committed suicide. Finally,
Yes,
you know.
yes, yes,
But
yes.
in this, she is talking about the attempts of suicide in
Mm,
Belgium.
mm,
So I think it was that intensity, you know, and expression of being a woman in particular, because she was
mm,
also writing confessional poetry.
mm, mm.
And I think somewhere, if you come closer home, then you have Kamala Das, you know,
Right, right.
and you have Kamala Das who, in a poem like My Grandmother's House, such powerful poetry, you know. And it was confessional in the same
Mm,
strain like Sylvia Plath.
mm,
And I found women's poetry to be so like Adrian Riches, you know,
mm.
or even, what's her name, this Polish poet, I think it's Wisława Szymborska.
Right.
Now, poet, such intense poetry. And yeah, I found that much more in women's poetry of that
Mm,
era in
mm,
particular. Yeah.
mm,
Because
mm.
there were new themes, new language being created for poetry. And that's what pulled me into poetry more and more, because I thought here is where you are telling the truth, which that truth cannot be pursued so much in life. And I'm
Mm.
talking about 70s now, right?
Right, right,
In
right.
70s and 80s.
Mm,
This is what we were struggling with women, because
mm,
we were trying to find language for ourselves, you
mm,
know.
mm.
So, which otherwise was tabooed in poetry or in sophisticated writing,
Right,
right?
right.
So, I think it was that which gave me a literal kick, you know, in my
Mm,
stomach.
mm.
And I would say to myself, I wish I could write that. I wish I would be able to write that kind of poetry. But I'm not sure I write that kind of poetry, but yes, certainly there is a certain intensity that people realize.
Sure.
And my thing has been that I write, try to write in as few words as possible.
Mm, mm, mm.
I
Right.
don't want to. I don't want to indulge in words.
Fair enough.
I
Fair enough.
feel indulged. Uh,
What would a young girl who's reading Plath think? I mean, apart from the fact that there was a incredibly tragic but hugely talented woman who's writing incredible poetry, but is spinning a life which is also hurtling towards some kind of an oblivion. And here's this young girl reading this and being affected by it. I mean, how does that state bring the poet out in you? Is it something which actually pushed you towards poetry, or is it something which also affects lives? I mean, the thinking. How does that play out in a young girl who's reading something like Plath? I specifically asked this question because Plath is a very powerful influence on so many people, and it kind of spins out in all kind of directions. You know.
yeah, yeah. You know, I really don't want to divorce life from poetry.
Mm,
And you're right when you are asking this question or raising this point, because I really do feel that life is it's very complex. It's so serious. It's so serious that it becomes absurd.
mm,
You know, the absurdity of it, which that angle was given to me by Samuel Beckett.
mhm,
You know, and that was like as a young woman when I was teaching Waiting for Godot, right?
mhm,
And I began to, with Sylvia Plath and with Beckett, juxtaposed,
mhm,
somewhere in between, I was trying to weigh out words which truthfully express life in such a way that there is a parallel life that gets created there,
right.
you know, in words themselves. So that is why I would want to cancel out words and make it naked, the truth.
Right.
You know.
Right.
Now, how does, and I mean, I would do that, like you have the chisel in your hand and you want to cut off just a little, but the whole thing would come off, right?
Yeah. That
Maybe
danger's
because
there.
it's yes. So maybe it is extraneous, therefore. Then you go this way and that way, and you chisel it out in such a fashion that a few words would carry the whole burden of that experience, you know. And it's like, you know, like Beckett says that the womb is the tomb.
The womb is the tomb.
Tomb.
Yeah.
So your birthing and dying is simultaneous in every moment, right? Metaphorically. So God knows how many suicides one commits that way. I don't know if I'm saying this because of the influence that I had also on my father on me, which I never used to take seriously earlier. Now that is no more, and I've been working on a book, with someone on that whole aspect also. He wrote a self-obituary. Really? And in that self-obituary, he's describing 5 major deaths that he has had in life. Okay. So what I'm trying to say is that, I mean, one has to really get deep into the idea of what is dying anyway, right? So what you said about the young girl, I mean, reading Sylvia Plath and getting torn somewhere in between, life and poetry. I think the young girl would mature very fast because of that experience. Right. Of that kind of poetry. And that kind of poetry lends itself to, because the words are very simple to look at. And they're very magical because you see the heavy import of those words through their simplicity. Yes. You are able to see it because of the way the lines are. Dying is an art, and I do it exceptionally well. Amazing. Right? Absolutely. Amazing. So simple. No complication. But yes, it's a very complex thought process, experientially, right? So, I don't know. It's a very beautiful journey to me. I mean, I feel blessed also, and I feel cursed that I'm writing poetry. Why can't I just go have fun, And what is fun? I don't know, because I can't be flippant about this, I'm condemned to write. Sometimes I feel. But just when the poem is over, I feel blessed. Right. Over and done with at last. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. What for you would be, as a poet, as a writer, as an academic scholar, be the meaning of life? Well, you're going on very dangerous grounds, when you talk about the meaning of life. I don't want any meaning in life. I want life itself. I don't want meaning, like that's a curse of a scholar, When you're constantly looking for meaning, reducing experience to a meaning, and then saying QED, point proven. I don't want that. I know that the moment I say this is the meaning, I will see another meaning in it. I would see layers, and that is the art of living. That is the art of writing the poem. Living is like writing the poem, And so you would not be able to reduce it to meaning. So what is the meaning of life? It is perpetually changing, like the meaning will change this minute it is this, but next minute, because my consciousness has registered that I'm talking to Sunil and my conversation is going on, I might shift from that point to something else, the meaning.
Right. Right.
So I don't know what life means. It is perpetually making different meanings and canceling them.
Okay. Interesting. So interesting. As a writer, what then determines for you what is the project you'll pursue? Is it something which comes to you as some kind of an epiphany, or is it something which suddenly strikes you as interesting? Because there's time which you have to devote to any one of your pursuits. None of them are flippant. All of them are serious and all of them are very different. You are so many things. What then makes you give priority to a particular project at any given point of time?
Yeah, I think in all, whatever, I mean, I don't like the word project, but they become projects, yes. But, yeah. So I do not take on anything which I don't want to do, usually, right? I mean, there are certain things that one is compelled to do. When I used to be like that. Yeah, as a profession, you have to. But then if you are, I think, open to being creative about it. Like I used to hate teaching English language. I would love to teach literature, but I would hate to teach language. But then there came a point when I started enjoying doing it, because when you relate to those who do not know and you are imparting something.
Yeah.
And also learning by imparting. And what you see getting across, you're learning. You're also learning the art of teaching and communication.
Right.
And when you see those eyes illuminating, because of what you may have said.
Such joy.
So it's a great joy. So you have to be so creative and it has to come out. Sometimes, my first teaching assignment, when I was very young, I deliberately, because that is a time when the senior teachers don't give you enough literature to teach.
Right.
They give you language classes, and there are 100 students sitting in front of you. And those 100 students, if they are in a good college, so-called good college, they all know English. They come from that background. So they're not going to take you seriously. Chick of a girl who's just come to teach us, So they would start making fun of you. Then I thought about a strategy. And one had to be very creative to confuse them first. Give them very powerful, big words and ask meanings of that, And show them that they are ignorant about language, ordinary language mistakes that everybody's making, Start talking about that. And finally, then they will come around and start listening to you. So you have to be very creative with your strategies, to teach, to communicate.
This is so funny, really. But do tell us about your first book of poetry, Oscillations, right? I think from 1974. So how did that come about? Was it a struggle, or how was the genesis and the final?
To tell you the truth, one reason why that book happened, because I just wanted that the book I should get rid of those poems.
Okay.
I was so possessed by them,
Oh my God.
And I think that works very well. Once the book is published, it's like, Hindi mein kehte hain na, doli nikal gayi. The girl has gone. Right?
Out of your head, mind, heart, ghar se nikal gaya.
Now let her go have struggle in the other's house or whatever, your job is done, you're married.
Oh, I love this.
I was so obsessed with my own poems. It was like horrible. And then my father said, be patient. You shouldn't be publishing. Wait. And in spite of that, I published the book, And I'm honest about it that I got rid of them. I mean,
Okay.
after that, I could write new poetry only because that was out,
Okay.
you know.
Okay.
So there was kind of space created. Poetry, your own poems you should not be obsessive about it. They
Right.
should possess.
Right. Yeah.
You have to disengage yourself from
Yeah.
what you have done,
Yeah.
right? And today, when I look at those poems, I mean, 90% of them I would obviously not want to publish. But yeah, there are 10 to 15% which are good.
Right. Right.
Good.
So they say that, publishing a book is like dropping a feather in a well. That's the kind of noise it makes. So how does it work? I mean, was it well received, uh, or was it well received by a few, via many? What is the kind of noise did it make?
It made a little noise. It
Okay.
had 3 or 4 reviews,
Mm-hmm.
and 3, 4 reviews. Yes, 3, 4 reviews. But it also got me. At that time, there weren't festivals and these
Yeah.
things happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I know because I was doing my PhD soon after, and I was in ASRC, American Studies Research Center in Hyderabad, and I was invited because I had a book to my name, book of
Right. Right.
poems. I
Right.
was invited by the very sophisticated poetry circle there, Poetry Society of India or something, to come and read the poems. And I felt very good. I felt acknowledged. I felt that, it was important to be one, that there is a self-image, that the other thing is that others also acknowledge that.
Yes.
And so when I read the poems, there was a kind of an appreciation, and the books were distributed, and some got sold, etc., etc. So it didn't make a big noise at all. In any case, at that time, unless you were really already a big name,
Sure.
even now it happens, but at that time, it was like a feather in the well kind of situation.
Okay.
In one sense. And I didn't really bother about that. I didn't work towards, advertising the fact too much. But I was happy, and thanks to my father again and my mother, because they wouldn't allow this thing to go to your head anyway.
Which is such a big thing.
Yeah, it was such a boon for me to, realize that. Otherwise, one's creativity can be very stilted because of that.
So how do you, as a poet, how do you see yourself change? I mean, from the early days to what you do now. Of course, you said that it's just about 10 poems from the first book which you would like to keep, and but when you see your latest book, Vanishing Worlds, thematically, stylistically, how do you think you have, I won't say evolved, but how have you changed?
Yeah, I think this again is a paradox. On the one hand, I think there has to be some kind of I would say, a primal retaining of a primal innocence.
Right.
I think has to be there, for any poet to be able to write and to submit to creativity in a particular way, for the flow to be what it is. So on the one hand, it is that. On the other hand, I think you also, with more and more experiences added to your life, and you begin to see certain nuances, in words, which is also part of your experience. You begin to be more alert about it. Right?
Yeah.
And so I think it helps. Your poetry begins to contain greater complexity of life, even if it may seem simple, but there is a hidden complexity there.
Because you've experienced more.
Yes, you've experienced more, you've been more alert about it. But as I said, it's equally important to have a pristine kind of an innocence with which you are exploring reality, right? Or a new experience or whatever. If that sense of wonder which a child has, if you lose out on that, then you can at best be a crafty kind of a poet,
Yes, so right.
You cannot have it throb and smile when, the sun rises, or with the moon coming out. Whether you are a child or you are an old person, when you see a full moon, you feel enchanted.
Yes,
right?
yes.
So that kind of enchantment, that kind of a sense of wonder, that kind of a recognition of a twinkle in the eye of a person, to just capture it, uh, which goes unnoticed many a time, But it could be happiness, it could be pathos, but the primary emotions is what I'm talking about, right? Those primary emotions remain the same.
Right.
Even however old you are, you still want to have that cushiness of the lap of a mother, that warmth of a certain kind. You may fight shy of it, but you want it, right? You might find it in your husband or in your wife, but yeah.
Well said.
And then you can dismiss it by saying, "Oh, it's Oedipus complex or this or that." Nonsense, But we are looking at our primary relationships all the time.
Very true. Very true. How do you avoid cynicism from creeping into your being, your work? Because we are living in a very fractured times, and we are surrounded with so much which is which for a sensitive person, you are this is all osmosis. It goes into your being and it does come out in some way or the other. How do you maintain that innocence which you spoke about and not let that cynicism destroy it? Or you don't fight with it, you let it be what it is and see how it flows? I mean, how do you deal with this?
J. Krishnamurti's writings have helped me a lot.
Okay.
Not now. I mean, it's like the makeup of a mind, right? How is the mind shaped at the time when it requires shaping, right? Some fundamentals. I think when I was entering adulthood, that's the time when I read a lot of J. Krishnamurti with full feeling and passion and love, commitment. Nobody prescribed it to me. So it was one's own, out of choice that one was doing that.
Right.
And one of the things that he kind of constantly talks about is the whole idea of just be. It's almost like the message of non-attachment,
right?
But being here and now, totally with full consciousness,
right?
And if you are engaged with now, just as we are talking, and if we are able to synthesize various levels of consciousness through a certain integrative kind of faculty, how do you integrate all levels? That is what focus is, isn't it? That is what meditation is.
Sure, absolutely.
And if one is able to do that, then where is the room for negativity? You are totally engaged, right? You're totally engaged in this moment, like you are writing a poem, like you are painting, like all the other noises and everything. Even if sometimes, when you're cooking, maybe you're full concentration. I'm not a cook, but if you cook, I can see even my maid hates me to be around,
Yeah.
She cooks for me. My mother used to be like that. When she would cook, she wouldn't want anybody there. She would say, I want to focus, So even if she were to give you the recipe of what she's made, you will never be able to make it the same way.
Yeah.
Because she was enjoying it.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Yes. So I think this total involvement and submission to the moment, it clips you away from all the extraneous stuff. And I think that is what makes you retain yourself also.
Right.
It is a survival uh, tactic as well, I believe. And where is the room for cynicism then? Cynicism comes out of judgment.
Yes, yes, yes.
You're not judging things. You're not judging. You're accepting things subconsciously as they are coming, whatever. But your mind has been trained to also sift, do this and don't do this. So you better know what you are choosing to do. The choice has to be made, isn't it?
Right.
Somewhere.
Right.
So it's a very tight rope walking, kind of thing.
Fair enough. Fair enough. We all need to be Zen practitioners at some point. We need to take a call on that. Absolutely. I so agree with you. Tell me, Sukrita, how did Red River come into your life?
Red River was a very beautiful accident. Because it's somebody, Divya Jyoti's friend, Madhu. In a poetry reading, it is he who introduced me to Divya.
Correct.
And he said, ma'am, and all of them say ma'am to me, which is whatever. So, ma'am, you should definitely give one of your books to Divya. So it just stuck in my mind. But 2 years later, when Yasmin and I were doing this, it just occurred to me that Divya, this lovely person, it is this book is meant for him. He has to do it.
Wonderful.
And it was like coming together because Divya is also a very creative poet himself. He's a poet and he's a creative publisher and he designs very well.
He's amazing.
So it became collective. It became a collective. It was not like you're talking to a impersonal publisher. I didn't care whether the book was going to sell or not, but in the doing of it, there was such great joy.
Yes.
It was such a wonderful interaction that we had. And he it's not as if he's unknowingly saying yes to everything. No. But you can go along, he goes along and you go along with him.
Right.
Right. And then his suggestions and your suggestions, and you just come together in a big torrential river, when the book is happening.
Yeah.
And that I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed working with him. Yeah. And so I feel that this is a very beautiful publication. I want to say publication house,
Yes.
Right?
Very true. Independent publishers fill a huge gap, and with a body like Red River, which has now established itself well, what do you think should be the next stage of evolution which they should aspire for? Because one of the big things which I have noticed is in these festivals, it's the big publishers who get all the prominence with their authors and the poets and all. The small publishing houses are relegated to, one of the side events. But that, is failing the authors also, because some of the authors who have got published by independent publishers are outstanding. Just because they've not got published by a big publisher doesn't mean that they are not the quality which they aspire for. So what do you think should be the next stage of evolution in this particular publishing journey, which itself is fraught with so many heartbreaks and problems?
Totally. I really feel that, if we can, probably, Divya, I think now, for instance, this program that we are doing with this conversation that we are doing, I think conversations help. I think the word has already spread that he's a good publisher, that they are doing, Red River is doing well. And I think two things, actually. One, that he should definitely keep his eyes on the quality. Do not let it degenerate at all in any way, right? Maintain a very strict eye on quality. That's one. Two, I think there is a compelling need for distribution.
Yeah, that's a big issue.
If he can make his books visible in bookshops and in, a variety of places. It's that other act of, I hate to use the word advertising, but advertising sensitively. Right? if that can happen, and is happening a little, but it should happen more by,
More.
through social media, because I think poets themselves are also doing it. Okay, this is my book, Red River has done it, etc. That's
True.
happening. But that's another thing. And if he can be, I don't know if there can be some support coming through in terms of financial things, so that he's free of that angst always.
Yeah.
And it's not nice to be for a poet to have to pay so much for a good.
True.
So that also one can't be asking the poets to be doing it. And yet, what do you do if you just can't? You can't be doing charity this way.
You're absolutely right.
Paying for everybody's books and so on. So there has to be some support, either through an arts council like situation, like in England, you have an arts council.
True.
But here also, if he can make a small collective, collective of like-minded people, and maybe then work towards getting a huge grant from some organization, from say Art Foundation. In there is an Art Foundation, isn't it? India Art Foundation or something.
Yes, there is. Yeah.
So something like that.
Sure.
So that he doesn't have to go through that kind of an angst.
Right.
So visibility, quality, number one, quality. Number two, visibility. More visibility. 3 is the finance. That's it.
Yeah.
That's
okay.
it.
Fair enough. But tell me, poetry is something which everybody adores poetry. Everybody has a favorite poem of theirs, but it doesn't sell. And that's why I think the most of the publishers are very hesitant to bring out in great numbers. That's where the boldness of someone like Red River is really to be appreciated.
Yeah.
How do you address that? Why doesn't poetry sell the kind of numbers you would like it to sell?
I think to begin with, if some of this stuff gets prescribed, as in the curriculum at various levels, high school, college, university, and there are hundreds of universities in India. So any book that gets prescribed will sell a lot.
Right.
So how do you break? But there also you need to break a nexus of sorts. There is a nexus.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's a task. It's a very big battle.
It's a big task.
And it's a very big battle. Anthologies do better. Anthologies do better because there is a pooling in that happens of many names and so on. But individual poets, unless 2, 3, 4 poets in the country, unless you acquire a name like that, your books are not going to sell.
Yeah.
That is not only a problem in India, by the way. It's a universal problem.
Universal problem. I know. Absolutely. Yeah. Sukrita, a poem from you, a poem from the Red River book, Country Drive.
Yeah, Country Drive. Yes. I inevitably always end up, because this is a poem that I myself, relate to very well in terms of, it's my own poem, but I call it At Wagah.
Wow.
At Wagah, I love you the most. The border marked by the spectacle of stomping army boots, shining medals, beating their chests into the rising and setting sun. The day becoming night and the night day. When the guards on both sides change, bang, bang, bang. I love you the most at Wagah. When the guns are raised to salute separation, division, and rupture. When the neighbor dies and wears the shroud and becomes enemy all at once. My friend, you go away only as a bird does, flying in the free skies when lines of hatred rise. Against prayer flags, Wagah happens. And I love you the most because you are on the other side of the border.
What a poem. My God. I have my hair standing on its end. It's so beautiful, Sukrita. It's wonderful, really.
Thank, thank you.
In fact, I've got so many favorites in the book. I mean, there's one, I think it's called Women on a Motorbike, which has so much of
Oh,
fun
yeah,
in
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Oh
Yes,
my God, I
yes.
love
And
that
that has
poem.
to do, Sunil, that's the poem that comes out of my writing for Yasmin kind of thing. Because
Yeah.
that's not, yeah. I mean, that's Yasmin's personality coming out. You want to
That's
read that?
oh, that'd be lovely. It's such a charming
All right.
poem.
All right. Women on a motorbike. Sisters and daughters, even mothers, are hurled into daily abuses and jokes, trapped in muscular gaze, frozen as soft targets in epics, dolls in cinema, excuses for duels, cause for battle in the past and the present, possessed as furniture, items of jewelry, kept in vaults in the royal cellars of history. While Sita greets Savitri, singing songs of captivity, shedding tears of loss and regret, two women on the motorbike, Lal Ded and Akka Mahadevi, whiz past through centuries, multiplying in numbers as also in Shakti, each one searching her own path, her own tune.
This is
So
so beautiful. Absolutely wonderful.
it's a
Really,
very
really
different
love.
kind.
Yeah, it
It's my
is.
kind of feminism.
Oh my God. Tell me,
Yeah.
any contemporary poets you adore in India and abroad? People you love to go back to?
Yeah, actually, I always have this book by my bedside,
Which
and
one?
this is Wisława Szybowska's, Polish
Okay.
poet.
Wow.
Yeah,
Sure.
who got her, she also got the Nobel Prize in 1996 or something.
Okay. Okay.
But Szymborska's poetry is hard hitting in a very strange way. It
Mm-hmm.
flows gently, but is
Mm.
deceptively gentle.
Okay.
It's not all that gentle. It hits you. Yeah. So I read this poem if you like.
Yes, please.
It's a
Would love
speech,
to.
yeah, a speech at the lost and found.
Okay.
I lost a few goddesses while moving south to north, and also some gods while moving east to west. I let several stars go out for good. They can't be traced. An island or two sank on me. They are lost at sea. I'm not even sure exactly where I left my claws. Who's got my fur coat? Who's living in my shell? My siblings died the day I left for dry land, and only one small bone recalls that anniversary in me. I have shed my skin, squandered vertebrae and legs, taken leave of my senses time and again. I have long since closed my third eye to all that, washed my fins of it, and shrugged my branches. Gone, lost, scattered to the four winds, it still surprises me how little now remains. One first person sing, temporarily declined in human form, just now making such a fuss about a blue umbrella left yesterday on a bus.
Oh my
It's a
God. Oh
marvelous
my
poem.
God. I mean, such simplicity and what profundity.
Yes.
Oh my God.
And I was wondering, these are obviously translated poems, but look at the
Imagine.
translation.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Imagine.
so
Imagine the
beautiful.
power of the
Very
original.
rich. Yeah, really. Very, very rich poems.
What role would you like your poetry to fulfill in this world?
I think sharing and therefore empathy, right? Because literary creativity or creativity is activism. It's activism. It arouses, it's social activism. It arouses sensitivities of various kinds to the plant, to the animal, to the planet, to the other. It connects. Creativity connects, And I hope that my poetry is like that. It needs to connect. It needs to bring people together. It needs to arouse all that I'm saying, sensitivity.
Sure.
I have a lot of poems about trees, for instance. I have paintings. I've been painting trees a lot. So there is something mysterious about the tree. And every day when I go for a walk, I want to feel the throb of the tree trunk, and put my hands where, particularly when the bark is, coming off at that point. Sometimes it hurts me, but I want to press on that, feel the inside of the tree and reach through my meditation to the roots, because there is below the earth, all the roots are connected somewhere.
Wow.
I feel. So it's that kind of, I don't want to use the word network, but it's that kind of network that I would cherish,
Right.
We are all connected. That we are, whether it's a crow on the tree or the ants that are, crawling up or down or whatever, or there is a squirrel. It's a whole world, And then when you think of the below the earth, what's going on, it's another world out there.
Yeah. How beautifully you put it. Loved that. I really hope there's a world where poetry is the thing which determines everything. It would be such a better and a more beautiful world. Let's end with one more poem of yours. Anything of your choice. I'd love to you to read one out.
All right. So let me read from another book now.
Sure.
Which is Dreamcatcher.
Okay.
This book is called Dreamcatcher. And interesting, there is a little book with it also. This is, this was brought to me by the publisher.
How interesting.
This little book. And this was just to show me the design. And I said, but I want a small book, It looks very cute. So it's not really even cute. Half the size.
Yeah. So there's just one copy of the small book. Just one copy of it.
Yeah. So sorry, what did you say?
There's just one copy of that small book.
No. She had brought to me this book to show. This is the kind of book that we are going to. This is the design of it.
Sure.
And this is as a design. I said, no, but I want you to publish this, And then she, why don't you write something for it? So I wrote behind the poems Dreamcatcher. So I wrote a whole essay, and then this was published.
How wonderful. How wonderful. Such a lovely idea.
Yeah, I loved it. And so I'm going to read a poem which is called Dreamcatcher.
Sure.
Right? I must reach the forest in time, before the break of dawn each day, to pick some dreams scattered in misty darkness. I must reach before the sun crackles, through the leaves of the trees on which dreams pile up, perching on the branches through the night. Dreams half dreamt, fully dreamt, and those yet to be dreamt, like babies born and unborn, crying out for attention, making weird faces in sleep. I pick what gets my fancy, bits from my wrinkled past, the shadowy fragments of future, mixing in twilight droplets of dew, ready to vanish with sunrise. Each day, I come home with a bag full of dreams that drip through the day for me and all. Each night, I wait for the new dawn.
Oh, beautiful. This is wonderful. I think we couldn't have ended on a better note, Sukrita. May the grace and beauty and the warmth of your words never cease. I really, really hope we get to see
Thank
you
you.
writing more and more. Thank you so much for the charming conversation. Absolute magical.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Sunil.
Thank you.
Thank you.